Dzień dobry. I think that with my beautiful French accent, it would be much easier to interrupt me. You know, it's my nightmare to be a speaker after a speaker who speaks a real English, because with my broken English, it's like, ugh, difficult to speak after you, only I will do my best. So thank you for inviting me, especially because you will understand immediately that I'm not a specialist of animation at all. So why am I here? It's quite simple, I guess, to understand. I will have to let you know a little bit about me before we jump into the topic and before I will deliver you not a masterclass about adaptation, but a kind of overview of the journey in the adaptation field. You know, from different perspectives, we'll understand this entire process, and I will give you as many tips as I can for people who would like to adapt. Even if it's not now, it would be maybe later on. So why me talking about adaptation, being here, as my last 30 years in the business is in feature film, fiction, live action, as people from animation say. I guess because with my company, which is Initiative Film, I've got double stuff in here. I'm first Initiative Film, and Initiative Film is partner of AdaptLab, and I will explain both. I used to be a producer. Much before I used to study, because I'm inspired by your lecture, Oli, when you were starting from the very beginning and being you at university. So I've been also at university, but nothing to do with film business. I have a PhD in Byzantine history. So as you can understand, it can lead everywhere, you know, like even in film business. And I used to be a producer. I started in production company in the 80s. Yes, I'm much older. So I spent 7 years learning my job as a producer, and I was lucky enough to be in charge of co-production in that company, meaning that after a while, the co-production were my own choice, even though I was not a partner, I was just an employee. And I guess only because I'm a hard worker, I didn't have any special skills in production, but I was, and I'm still a hard worker. Suddenly I had more and more possibility and responsibilities, and after 3 years, I was able to choose the co-production I wanted to jump in. And after a while, I have done, I guess, 6 international co-production, and I was line producer in 7 feature film, French feature film. After a while, I thought, and maybe I was wrong, that it was not the right job for me. I realized that at a very weird moment of my professional life, because I realized that just when I heard that my last co-production was selecting in official competition in Cannes. It was a Canadian-French co-production, so I was a French co-producer. The film was called Léolo of Jean-Claude Lauzon in '92, so quite a long time ago already. And this film has been a failure, but is still a kind of a cult movie for A-list directors. So it was my idea to the world of cinema, even though I had already a background as a producer. But at this particular moment of my life, I realized that I was not really happy as a producer. To tell you the truth, everything was talking about development process. You know, it's completely different in your business, but in cinema, for many, many years, in feature film, we were a kind of letterbox. People were sending us letters, meaning project, talents, and we were saying, no, 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 maybe, no, 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 maybe, and yes, you know. And it was not really creative this way, because of course you can really, fall in love with somebody you meet like this. But what is your own decision in that process? It's very little, you know. So I was always looking for new faces, new talent, new skills also, because, you know, we were very fast developing when it's a real important process, and we were very slow financing, which was the case anyway. And then, you know, it was never the right rhythm. And I was looking for example, co-writers, writers, subject, new directors, and a way to work quite different. But I had no time at all. you know, because you have the ex-film that still is a company, you have to do your public relation, you have to convince people to finance your next project, you go to festival, you go to shooting, you are in post-production, and then the time for research is like this. And after a while in a company, it shows. It shows because you are redoing exactly the same all the time. Because people who are sending you the letters think that if you've done, for example, 3 thrillers, it's because you want to do 4 thrillers, 5 thrillers. So they don't know you. So of course they know you through your lineup. And then you are back to the same all the time. And you have never time to stop this and say, okay, I've done this, what do I want to do now? So I've done it on my own level. I stopped working in production, took 1 year off. Huge luxury. But we were talking about that this morning. You know, this luxury made me poor, and because I was more poor, I was able to take more risk. Because when you have something to lose, you don't take risk, which is also the story of development. You need to take risk. Anyway, it's a fucking risky moment of film, of this production, you know, process. So I was back to literature, and suddenly it inspired me a lot. As a producer, because I was still a producer, even if I quit the job, and as a human being, and as a potential audience, obviously. And at that time, some people were coming to me, directors, producers, writers, because it sounds bizarre, but 23 years ago in my country, the scriptwriters were very few. You know, there was a generation of what? 5 to 7 people. 3 of them were unreachable because they were asking for too much money for young producers and directors. And the 4 others were more flexible, let's say. But there was a generation of people who wanted to write for cinema. They were writing already for TV, but they wanted to write for cinema. But there was no bridges, no link between the two. And listening to those people, I was thinking, what do I have to give them? Why do they come in this ugly village in France? Okay, I cook well, that's okay. But what else do they look for? And I had the answer, which was quite easy. I have time, and of course, I have skills to share. And when I came back to Paris after 9 months, it was too complicated to stay a year. After 9 months, I've decided to create a company, which is still my company and which is called Initiative Film. I thought this company was my way to find my new partner or boss. I thought I would have a company for 2 or 3 years maximum, and my company is 20 years old, 22 years old now, so obviously I like it. And I say obviously I like it because making money, being a development advisor, is quite difficult or maybe impossible, but I make my living, I can feed my people, and I'm so happy with what I'm doing every day that I think that it's a great luxury, you know. I had no model. We're talking about a business model. No business model, no model at all, because what I wanted to do is to cast talent, to scout story, to be partly story editor, consultant, but consultant in a huge level, because the French considered at that time that development means writing process. I'm completely against this definition. For me, development is a study of feasibility in all levels. First of all, human, because you can really like the work of somebody. When you are in front of a director that you cannot fit with, it will never work. It's, as you said, it's human chemistry. Human, you know, everything is based on the potential link that you can make with somebody, with a human being. So it's human, of course, artistical level, but I can consider as well legal aspect and the economy of development, how to find money for development, how to find your right partner when you develop, because you know that it's a nightmare. When you look for partnership, when you look for co-production, if you do that at early stages of your project, you can really think in an intelligent way in order to share what needed to be from your country, from my country, in terms of numbers that we have to deal with in order to get the money from the subsidies, from media or from other doors, of course. And then if you start thinking at early stages, it's much more easy, you know. And I started alone, and now we've been 7, but it was quite impossible. Now we are three people indoors, and I've got consultant also in other countries, and I'm working 70 or 80% of my time in feature film, fiction, feature film, cinema, sometimes docs, and hopefully I will in animation. Because I'm quite open, because I really dislike the wall we have between each other, because at the same time we do more or less the same work. Of course there are differences, much more. For example, when you do a study of feasibility, meaning development, for me, the technical aspects are not yet there. You know, it's very few examples that you have to consider the technicity of the project that somebody has in mind. Otherwise, it doesn't count. You know, yes, I became, okay, the French didn't like the idea at all, you know, because for people who know the French, we are very arrogant, and we don't like to be advised on artistical level, because we are so good, you know, that who can give you any advice, you know, everything. Mentality has changed, you know, new generation is different, but my generation and the oldest one was very difficult to convince. So I'm going to answer, you will not question that to me, but I think your question was interesting, you know, like how did I convince people at the beginning? Oh, it was very tricky, you know. I knew that in Paris, many people wanted to have me as a producer indoors. So I pretended that, why don't we try, why don't you give me a mission first? If it works well, maybe I can consider your offer. If it doesn't work well, that's it, you know. And it worked well, otherwise no client, but they understood that it could be much more interesting to have somebody outside doing development than somebody inside. Because the somebody inside is a somebody who say, no, 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 maybe, yes, no, 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 you know, and it doesn't work, you know. Me, I can survive, because when I scout a book, if it's not for my producer number 1, it could be for my director number 7, or for my producer number 10, or for somebody I don't know yet. I'm scouting for the industry. So it makes completely different way of thinking, you know. And of course, at the beginning, I had to invest time, not really money, but time is money. I had to invest my own time in order to really understand who is doing what and how. And I became, without noticing, a specialist of adaptation. I'm not so sure I'm a specialist of adaptation, but of course, I'm a facilitator. Because many times, people don't really know how to adapt. I'm not talking about scriptwriters. I'm talking about people in general. Like, oh yes, I read this book, but you know, I thought it was too complicated, you know. And it's not really complicated. Of course, there are some stuff that you really need to know, and we're going to try to talk about that today. But it's not so complicated. But it's true that it's also a question of networking. It's much more easy for me to negotiate with a publisher that I know for 20 years than for somebody who just jump in, you know, and doesn't know anything about the market. Because for books, there is definitely a market. So, Initiative Film, based in Paris, working internationally. I guess I try every year to increase the number of producers, directors I'm working with abroad. So it means that France plus Switzerland plus Belgium is 50% of my activity. The rest of 50% is the rest of the world. Never really worked with Asia, and I'm sorry about that. Not even though with the US, which is completely different and too far away from my roots and mentality, even though everybody tells me only the American understand what you do, maybe. But I'm really European, I guess. And we started with this idea of taking, it's for 12 people a year. 6 people are scriptwriters from all over Europe, coming with only the wish of being trained in adaptation. And 6 people are already with their own books, directors, author directors, producers, author directors, coming to the lab in order to have a push and to be helped to adapt. And we mix everybody together. And for now, we can accept people for animation, adaptation animation, but nobody knocked at our door yet, because probably nobody knows about it, you know. So we had a workshop last year in Krakow, and it was really the right place to be. I really enjoyed it very much. And we are moving every year. You know, it was also last year, because it's 3 workshops a year. One, obviously, in Torino, because there is a kind of big pitching event, and the 2 others are turning from one country to another. So it was Poland and Croatia last year. And this year is Netherlands. It was Switzerland and Netherlands. And next year, I don't know, it's still open. And in this lab, I understood really how much people need skills in adaptation. And they need also to be together, to think loud, you know, because we were also talking about that this morning. A scriptwriter is most of the time alone with himself. And it makes the process longer and more difficult, more heavy. You know, when you're in the lab, you talk with your colleague. You can take whatever. You can refuse the tips and the other ideas, but you are challenged all the time. So that's what is AdaptLab. And if you want to apply, everything is in Torino Film Lab website, and even I think in Creative Europe website, definitely. So, year after year, I can feel how much adaptation takes a bigger part in our conversation. Not because it's new. I think that adaptation were all the time in our mind, and many films from the very early beginning of cinema till now are adaptation, in animation as well, of course. But it's changing. It's changing, and you can see that it's changing also when you look to the publishing houses and publishing side, you know. They have a very different way to think about their work. For example, I'm involved in 2 stuff which are called Shoot the Book, quite easy to remember, Shoot the Book. Shoot the Book is a pitching session in Cannes and soon in Toronto. It's coming from the French publisher. I guess it's also because they are very well organized, and they pretend that they don't have money anymore. But I think that if we compare them to Italian publisher, for example, of course, they make much more money for many cultural reasons, but also because we can sell more in French than in Italian, probably. So they launched this new operation 2 years ago, Shoot the Book. And in Cannes this year, the 2nd year, we have been to the Busan Film Festival came to us to do an edition in Busan. Shanghai Film Festival did the same. So obviously there is something in the air. I remember in '99, I've tried to do that in Cannes, but it was too soon. Nobody was listening. You know, maybe I did it wrong, but I don't think so. Not only, maybe, just because people were not ready. Now people are ready. And even in small literature festival, like Quai du Polar in Lyon, for example, Quai du Polar is thriller and noir literature, the biggest festival for noir literature in the world. And now they're interested of hosting us in order to make the link between TV and cinema plus literature. So you have to be aware of that. And even though I'm not so sure that we are living in the age of adaptation, because statistics are lacking, I cannot say it's wrong or right. But what I can say is that different profile right now tries to adapt. You know, when I started to produce nearly 25, 27 years ago, adaptation were only for A-list directors. When you were a first-time director, even though it was in your mind, it was completely impossible to access adaptation. Why? Because nobody wanted to take an option for you, you know, and pay a scriptwriter or even pay yourself. And because when you have an option, when you acquire an option, you are in a hurry because you have an option only for a certain amount of months. So it was not for first-time directors. And stupidly, people thought that because nobody did adaptation, or nobody, almost nobody, said never nobody, almost nobody did adaptation as first feature, it's because young directors are too egotic and want to do their own material. But come on, you know, it's ridiculous, you know. It's like if you don't knock at the door because it's forbidden, it means that you don't want to knock at the door. No, it's because it's forbidden. That's it, you know. The desire was still there, you know, but nobody helped them at that time. And now more and more people want to adapt, and also what is adapting has changed a lot. You know, novels were 85% of what people used to adapt in the past. And now it's much more various. Of course, we can talk about play, we can talk about short story, we can talk about graphic novel, even about essay, you know, about non-fiction. You know, now it's much more various. People are really keen to dig and to take inspiration from different sources. So don't think that because, okay, some young people are really egotic and want to do their own blood, you know, on screen, and especially the French were specialists to do our bullshit, like a stupid love story or nothing happened in the film, but you know, it's my heart, it was my life, it was my ex-husband, who cares? But in books, you can find a much more various source of inspiration. And I feel that on field of animation, things are changing as well, you know. Of course, as you understood, I'm more feature and cinema than TV. But I made some researches, and I found some books adapted in animation. And what surprised me is that most of the books I found were not coming from comics, not coming from literature for young people. And I was thinking, there is an evolution there, you know, like, and if we go to my country now, and I'm not so sure it's a good idea, by the way, directors who used to do live action, they are jumping into animation. Only you can tell me if it's a good idea or not, but I think that it's probably most of the time something which is done in order to market better the film, because if you take a big name in live action and you put the name in animation, suddenly it rings a bell for the financiers. But I was quite surprised, you know, like, I'm not talking about, of course, Le Petit Prince, the Little Prince, probably a very bad idea to adapt, but anyway, it's my personal, just my personal thought. I didn't see anything, but you know, there are some weird stuff like this book, Why I Didn't Meet My Father, which turned as an ugly French animation movie. But who did it? Jamel Debbouze. And who's Jamel Debbouze? For us, is an A-list actor, you know, / comic. Somebody who has the power to do whatever he wants, you know. And it's interesting because it's not exactly what we are used to receive in the market. And other books, like, for example, Yasmina Kadra book, which is called The Swallow of Kabul, was a big success in literature in many countries, and now it's adapted by a French / ex-British, I don't know if she still has this nationality, but called Zabou Breitman. And Zabou Breitman has never done animation in the past. She's quite talented and very nice woman, but I was surprised because I didn't expect her to jump. And there are other, like, you know, this investigation book written by Mohamed Assaoui, The Slave Percy Affair, is also adapted in feature animation. And The Prophet of Khalil Gibran, you know, this Lebanese book, which is so important for in all the Arab world, is right now again adapted by Joan Sfar. So there are many stuff which rings a bell, which is quite different source of inspiration. But we have to go back to a simple question, because of course nobody is forced to adapt. Huh? It's just it has to be a desire, otherwise it's completely useless. And why? Why do people adapt book when they can write their own stories or direct or produce? I think that we can think about many reasons. And very simple, you know, I really like common sense. You know, I really like to to understand from very simple reasons, not to have a kind of a stupid idea that, oh, maybe that's why, maybe that's why. The market is always mentioned, but it's very rarely the market, because people who are talking about market when they adapt it, people who are able to reach bestsellers, and bestsellers is for only very few of us, you know. So because we cannot reach the amount of money that they are asking for a bestseller. So first of all, most of people who want to adapt, whether they are directors, scriptwriters, and producers, it's because they just fall in love with the book. It's as simple as that, you know. Suddenly you fall in love with the book, and if we are in our business, you start to see, even if you are not in this business, you start to see images. But suddenly, if you are in this business, you start to think of images who can become film. So falling in love is the first reason. Then, if you are a director, it's also something more difficult to capture, is being inspired by the universe of an author, of a writer. You know, when you talk with directors, suddenly you figure out that from their childhood or from their teenage or whatever, they are really inspired by this painter, this writer, and suddenly when they are mature enough, they feel that they are so connected that adapting one piece of art of this writer could be a good idea for them. And of course, there are many other reasons, like, for example, if you're a producer, or even if you are a director, sometimes you just want to regulate your development speed. It sounds weird to say, but you know, I don't know what it is in animation, but in feature, you know, when people develop one film after another, which is a very bad idea, by the way, because there are many reasons for you to be stopped in the process. And if you have only one development and you cannot carry on, you're just dead, you know, like, then you are, as a director, you know, obliged to do something else but what you want to do. So it's always good to develop, as producers, as directors, minimum 2 to 3 projects at the same time. And people are telling me, yeah, but you know, we don't have the money for that. Doesn't mean at the same level. You can have a treatment of one, a first draft of the second one, and a 7th draft of the others. This is also something difficult to understand, but you know, of course, if you cannot grab development money, if you can only try single project instead of Slate, it's difficult. And unfortunately, Slate is only open for quite mature company. So it's a vicious cycle. Again, when you say, you know, young directors, they just want to write their own story, untrue. And doesn't mean either that young producers, they don't want to knock at Slate. They would like to, but they cannot. So it's a vicious cycle. You need money to develop, and don't put all this money on the same project. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck, and it's going to be even bad for the project financed. So if you want to regulate the speed, and if you want, for example, after a success, you know, what could happen the worst? After a success, normally, we are waiting for that. Most of us, all our life. Not because of the success, but because of what a success can give you. Meaning that after a success, you are able to do whatever you want for a few months. If you don't have a second project in your pocket, you will travel all over the world with your film, you will have a lot of awards, everybody will love you, but when you're going to come back, and when you're going to knock again at the door with a new project, I cannot say that everybody forgot about you, but it's too late, you know. So you really need, after a success, you really need to push with something probably which was not only in your pocket, but in your mind, but already prepared, because you said, okay, I can put that in the market only if I do a success. So you have a film in the middle. One film which is your dream, one film which is affordable, whatever happened with your previous movie, and then you can jump again. But if it's a flop, it's the same. If it's a flop, you know, you have to react immediately. You have to have something immediately, because we all did flops anyway, and we still survive. But you have to carry on, and development is really the key for you not to fall down, you know. You have to keep the speed in a way. when you're a director as well, the same, because if you don't direct for 10 years, which happens, it's difficult to come back. Even if you are very talented, it's very difficult to come back. And of course, you can decide to adapt a book to seduce the market, because it's very difficult to seduce the market with a synopsis of 2 pages of something which is mainly in your mind, you know. But a book exists already. Of course, it's not a film, but anyway, very few people need how to read, so at least they know how to read a book, which is finished. You know? So you come with a book. The book has a track record. If it is, even though if it's not a bestseller, who cares? Bestseller is anyway 5%, you know, maybe even less. I don't know. But the book exists. It's seducing. You can touch the pages. It's even, you know, there is a sensual relationship between the book and yourself, which doesn't exist with that. Worse with that, you know, sensuality with that. I don't know, because I'm old, of course, but that's it. So with a book, you can connect quickly with broadcasters, potential co-producers, and everybody. So, of course, people consider books as well for this reason. Sometimes, but it doesn't happen so much, but let's say in my country, it's happening because the industry is still quite strong. Some people want to acquire rights just because they don't want the other producer to acquire the same right. So it's a kind of a war. I'm going to grab the material before other people grab it. Doesn't really work, because after you've got the option of the book, you still have to develop. And if you don't do it, you will lose your option anyway. But it happens, and it happens much more in the US. But in the US, it's a different process, because they are acquiring rights. It's copyright law, even in your country. So it's slightly different. We're going to talk about that later on. Scriptwriters cannot really be in that process at first. Of course, they can advise directors and producers to keep an eye on books, and they can give books to read and say, you know, I think it would be a very good film. But they cannot really acquire rights, because it's too complicated afterwards to gather directors and producers and be able to fit with what you need to do, because if you have an option for 18 months, you cannot write, find the director, find the producer like this, you know. So normally, they never acquire rights of books, but they are good advisors. And from a practical point of view, I can say that books have advantages that script don't have. First of all, many good books are available. It sounds bizarre to say, but it's very difficult to find a good script which is available and which has not been already sold to somebody else and, of course, burnt in the market. You know, and there is no library of scripts, and there are library of books that are reachable everywhere. You know, like in bookshops, in library, on internet, everywhere. Books has already an audience, so you can really think about it, and from lecturers' comment, you can understand what grab the readers to the book. And it's a good starting point to understand if it's the same stuff who hooked you as a reader, because we start as a simple reader, of course. Even though I cannot read anymore without thinking, could it be a film? You know, it's my curse, I guess. That's why when I read for myself, I read poetry and philosophy. Like this, I'm sure it cannot be adapted, which is good. Good for my brain. But otherwise, yes, you know, first of all, you're a reader. And what hooks you, you need to understand if it is exactly the same, or not exactly, but it's the same kind of stuff who hooked the readers. And you can reach that, especially now with internet, because of all those blogs. Easy, you know. Of course, a book has a commercial life, already. So it's good to give numbers, if you want to look for money for your development process, and blah, blah, blah. There is also something which is important. You know, we won't talk about that today because it would be too long, but to find good readers, it's very difficult, and I'm sure it's the same in animation. And to find good readers at early stages of development, it's even more difficult, because who can read first treatment, for example, and really think about what film it can be? And unfortunately, people think that they are good readers because they are saying bullshit, the bullshit that you said, what is the emotional journey of the character? Oh, okay, because they read in a book that it's a way that you have to question a script, which is untrue. This is cheap sentences, just to show that you need an answer. But it has nothing to do with script reading, the organic script reading. It took me 10 years to be a good reader. Who can invent 10 years? Me, because I'm a bit crazy, but 10 years, hundreds of scripts, in order to be sure that when I'm going to make a comment, it's going to be something which is going to touch the nerves of the project, and not the superficie, and not a sentence which you can say to everybody. So, good readers, and good readers at early stages impossible. Good readers of books, you don't question the same, it's different. And something else, when you're a producer and you dream of working with a director, could be the same in animation. Suddenly, you dream of this director, and you don't really know how to hook him. It's not only a question of money, come on, and it's a question of what can you give him that he cannot find elsewhere. Sometimes it's source of inspiration. I saw many people knocking at the door of a director say, hey, I thought it could be a very good book for you to adapt because of this. Of course, you have to be a bit, creative and express yourself. It's not only, hey, it's a book for you. Why, And suddenly, even if the guy said no, if, for example, you took an option for him, he will be flattered, or she will be flattered. But it's more than that. He will be understood, Every time I have a meeting with directors who are looking for the next movie, of course I did my homework before, I saw the film, the short, feature, blah, 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 and I said, okay, you're the type of guy who could adapt this author. And it's a bit pretentious to say that, but I'm French, so most of the time, when I mention an author, it's an author who would talk to the guy. Like it's somebody that he has in mind. For example, the young Hungarian guy who won the Grand Prix in Cannes this year, Laszlo Nemes, I called him after his first short. I was so impressed by his talent. And we met in Paris, and I told him, it's the first time in my life that I'm meeting a director who could adapt Agatha Christophe. Agatha Christophe, huge, beautiful female writer. And he said, it's a book who haunts me since I'm a kid. And I knew after that this guy and me, even though I'm not a producer anymore, we will have this special connection. So books can also help you as producers to understand each other better with the director, even though you will not adapt, because meanwhile, unfortunately, the right of Agatha Christophe has been sold. So the dream was, well, maybe not, because sold doesn't mean that the film has been done. So, and now, Laszlo Nemes is not Mr. Nobody. When I called a French publisher as a right of Agatha Christophe, when I called her, hey, I would like to introduce you a young director, 31 years old, no feature film behind, because I think he's the right guy to adapt Agatha Christophe. She said, come next time. Of course, too soon, but too late now, unfortunately. Anyway, the power of attraction of a book itself is crucial to start your process of adaptation. But of course, you can also grab poor literature. It has nothing to do with quality of literature. Sometimes it helps not to grab a book which is too good in a way. There are two different types of directors. Some directors say, if it's a too good book, it's really a piece of art, I cannot do it because I would feel that I will I don't know, not doing a job as good as the author with his book. But there is another category of directors who say if the book is not literature with a big L, it's not very good, very loaded, it cannot connect with me. So I don't care, I will do anyway. An adaptation is not the book in film. It's something new, it's a new piece of art, normally. So it depends, you know, but sometimes you connect with very poor books. But even though it could be a very good idea for feature, for animation, for TV series. But to fall in love with a book, you have to be in the mood for love, you know, and in the need of getting engaged or even married, you know, otherwise it doesn't happen. It's the same if you want to meet directors, you know, if you don't really feel the need of meeting them and falling in love with them, it will not really happen. Meaning that it sounds, what I'm going to say now, it sounds really ridiculous, but I can tell you that it's not so ridiculous. If you want to adapt, you need to go back reading. You need to read, you know. And in our job, it's very difficult to find the time to read, I don't know, one book a week, you know. Who can afford that? You know, it's kind of a dream. Like I can see Lars like, ooh, I wish I could, you know. Yes, that's also why when I did my company, I've got one person at the office who is only searching for books to adapt in general. And of course, he does that every day, all year long. So he reads 20 times more than me, you know. Otherwise, it would be impossible. And it's, but at the end of the day, because we are doing special researches, people are asking us to look for books for a special director, a special producer, a special lineup. So we are doing the exact opposite from the publisher. The publishers are coming with books going to you. And I'm coming from your desire going to books. And we meet, of course. There is a meeting point in the middle. But when I found, let's say, a couple of books, or when I do my selection, if you don't read, it will be gone. So, meaning that when you want to adapt, you need to find this time for reading, which is not so easy to find in our lives, because lives are crazy. And I agree with you. Unfortunately, in feature film, they are not so hard workers as you are. I feel like maybe I should have gone on your field, because I wouldn't be an alien like I am, you know, sleeping 5 hours a day, and really I still don't understand what means holidays, you know. For me, it's like, it's a concept that I never understood, you know. But in features, we are working less, even though people don't read enough in order to really jump into adaptation. Of course, the next barrier, the next obstacle is the language, you know, because more you can access languages, more you have possibilities. But it's not enough, because let's imagine that, okay, I read Greek, but if I fell in love with a Greek book and there is no translation, I cannot give that book in my country, on my own, you know, industry. So, meaning that more books are translated, better chances they have to reach the market. That's why in terms of numbers, you know, British and Americans' books are more spread off, because a lot of people can access English. It's more difficult with Polish, you know, like if you send me a Polish book, what could I do if there is no translation? I couldn't do anything, you know. That's also what we're going to try to do in AdaptLab. In AdaptLab, we are paying for a rough translation of the book. Doesn't mean that this translation can be published, because it's just a working translation. But in order to have access to the book, because we are sometimes 11 nationalities around the table. So, of course, we work in English. Sometimes I say, unfortunately, because, of course, you know, for example, we have asking a Spanish writer to write the dialogue in English doesn't really make sense. But at the end of the day, it's the only way to work together. So sometimes we are taking books on board which are not translated in English, and we pay for this translation in order to work together. So this translation issue, make you understand why some books which are, according to you, masterpieces for film are not adapted yet. It's just because we cannot access that books. Sometimes when you fall in love, it's tricky, because you can fall in love with a book, but unfortunately the book is already sold, so it's inaccessible. But inaccessibility is not only about the fact that some books have been already sold in the market, it's also linked to the fact that they are inaccessible in terms of money. Very few of you have a real idea of the amount of money to acquire the right of a book. And it really depends on many, many, many criteria that you have to keep in mind. Of course, the notoriety of the author, definitely, but this is quite obvious. The notoriety of the book itself, again, it's quite obvious. The notoriety of the publisher, sometimes you forget about it. And is there a market in the country of the publisher or not? For example, if you deal with Gallimard in French, which is the biggest publisher in my country, it's hell, because they don't really care. We still have a market. If you deal with Einaudi, which is the equivalent in Italy, they open doors like if you were the Messiah, like, oh yes, of course, and they are very open to, to modulate their rates and to give you a free option, which doesn't exist in my country. Free option doesn't exist, So it's really linked to the market inside the country. And some countries don't realize yet that they can make money with even option, because most of options are never free. No, free again. When you take an option, most of the time you drop the option. So the book is in the market again, So it's something that you have to think about, And you have to think of the good timing as well, because when the producer starts to negotiate an option, everybody has to be ready. The producers need to have the name of, more than the name, they have to have on board already the scriptwriter minimum, because if I give you an option now, Lars, you have 12 months to 18 months in order to know if there is a film inside the book. So if you start working with your scriptwriter 6 months later, you have lost 6 months for nothing. So it's new reflex, new way of thinking how to jump into development. And I was curious because not so many publishers negotiate rights for animation. So I called some of them and I said, okay, what is the big difference when you negotiate for animation and not for live action? And they said, sometimes we try to give longer option. Normally the rate is 12 months to 18, but you can renew that. If you're a good negotiator, you can renew twice. And I'm not so sure I have time to be in details, deductible of the minimum guarantee or not, but if people are interested, I can answer a question later on. And for animation, sometimes they give one more option, like 4 times 12 months, for example, instead of 3 times 12 to 19 months, because they understand that your process is slow. They don't do that when you are working for TV series, because they know that there is a broadcaster already. So normally, it will be a completely different process. But if you want to do a feature animation, they are more flexible. Doesn't mean that they're going to ask for less money, except if you want to do a TV series, for example, and they've got an offer for a feature film, live action. They feel suddenly, if both people agree, that you are not in competition, because it's not exactly the same, and if you are from different country, it could work, If, for example, you want to adapt a French book in a TV series for Scandinavia, and there is a French producer who wants to do a feature film in French, it's not really competitors, but it's really depending on how you deal together, you know. But otherwise, it's not so different, you know. The problem is that, and stop me if I'm wrong, but your budget is quite high. I mean, low budget feature film animation, not really possible. Depends what you call low. But so of course, because they want a percentage linked to the total budget of the film, those rights are going to be expensive. So I guess that there is a kind of lobby that you have to make with this, you know, I think that it's time to raise your voice. And now it's like a tribune as people in animation, because I think that publisher needs to have a completely different way of thinking when they deal with you. And you really need to think about it, because why not having kind of a confrontation between the two before you are negotiating, because it's much easier to start talking about this when you are not negotiating. When you negotiate, it's like you are, okay, normally you are on the same boat, but of course there are differences. Yeah, you know, it's important as well to understand how far you can go to acquire an option. Because sometimes people ask me to do the first round with a publisher, and I discover that it's not important for them. So everybody's losing time. But sometimes I realize that it's the film of their life. And then you start negotiating in a completely different way. Sometimes it's a bit surrealistic. For example, I had a phone call 5 months ago of a guy in LA who wants to acquire the right of a book, French book, and he told me, you know, I'm calling you because everybody told me that it's impossible. But I don't understand why, because it's a book of the 57, and I don't know, you know, it's not even published again anymore. And I said, okay, what's the title? And of course, it was a kind of cult book for the French, a book of Barjavel, and La Nuit des Temps, which is like, I said, okay, you know, this kind of book, because Gallimard can keep the right for a long time, they don't need the money now. They will keep it for a big name director. For example, Gallimard has decided to give to Michael Cimino the right of André Malraux, but before they said no to everybody. So it's, you know, it's all those stuff you need to know and understand in order to jump the proper way, you know. Then after that, you know, when you found your book, there are 4 different possibilities. First possibility, it's in public domain. Or you think, oh yes, I'm quite lucky, public domain, I can make it. Yes, public domain, it's easy. Now all Europe works the same. It was not the same in the past, but it's 70 years after the death of the author. In the past, it was if the author was living during the war, during the war count doubles. If he was a soldier, count triple. If he was wounded or died during the war, it counts 4th time. It was a nightmare. We used to go and say, oh, is the guy was a soldier? Yes. Oh, I don't know. So now it's easier, 70 years after the death of an author. And also, you know, it was not working for female authors. So apparently the war doesn't affect women, you know. Of course, they were not soldiers, so it was crazy. Anyway, now it's 17 years, easy. Even Wikipedia can tell you when the guy died. But of course, it sounds great because you don't have to pay, and that's it. But the big problem, you know about it already, of course, is the fact that other people are looking for the right, for example, if it's a kind of famous author or a brilliant book. And you never know until you are coming in the market that there is a competitor. And sometimes it's very late and you invest a lot of money. That's why we had 2 liaisons dangereuses, you know, one of Stephen Frears and one of Milos Forman, thank you. Oh, God. And of course, the first one on screen, some people think anyway the Frears was better, but the first on screen took most of the audience. And then it was possible because it was Milos Forman and Stephen Frears, which are not unknown directors. Imagine if it was Mr. Nobody and Stephen Frears. That's it. The producer wouldn't be able to carry on. So public domain it's a poison gift. Except if you go to a completely unknown story, which exists, of course, because it's, okay, you have very little chances that two people have the same idea. But especially when 7 years arrived, you know, the year where you can access, I don't know, Joseph Kessel or I don't know who, everybody, it's normal because we are waiting for that, you know, like I'm waiting for Marcel Aimé 17 years after his death, many authors. And when it happens, people are waiting. So be careful about that. Let the big shot shoot first. Then, when the rights are available, of course, you start a negotiation. And I will give you a few stuff about that. When the rights are under option already, don't cry. You know, doesn't mean so much. You know, like people are, normally they just call and said, oh, it's gone, it's under option. Said, yeah, but first of all, how long? Just ask this question to the publisher. Normally, I don't know why, they don't tell you directly. Okay, it's under option, but when does the option expire? Sometimes you learn it's in 2 months. So it's very easy to wait for that. Most, as I said, most of options are not renewed or even are not nobody purchases the right at the end, you know, because sometimes we all know, I think in animation is the same. It's a long process, and we cannot produce everything we develop, unfortunately, especially in features. So be patient. If you said option, call again and call again and call again, and make an offer. Make an offer. Like this, I understand that you are really serious. You know, sometimes you don't know, but try. Call people. When the rights are purchased already, now you can be really sad, and but even though, you know, sometimes you never know. Some people bought the right and do nothing with that. So try to know who bought the right if you are really motivated, and knock at the door. You know, it happens to me twice. The first time was for Jean-Pierre Jeunet. He wanted the right of a book which was already in the hands of Americans, but because he was Jean-Pierre Jeunet, and you know, the Americans acquired the right of that book in the 60s, did nothing with the book, but they acquired, it's copyright, so it meaning that they have the right forever, you know. They didn't even remember they had the right of the book, by the way, you know. So he knocked at the door after Amélie Poulain, and of course Warner Brothers was so happy, because nobody, anyway, would do anything with that book. So because of that book, they signed a Jean-Pierre Jeunet movie. It was not the best, but whatever, you know. You know, so it's never feel like it's a no, especially if the right has been bought by Americans. Because they are buying much more than us. And as they buy under copyright law, they keep the right sometimes, and they would be very happy to sell it again. But there is no second market for rights. Something we could invent, by the way. Yeah, why not? It could be a good idea. I bought those rights for a director. I'm not working for the director anymore. Who wants the right? You could be co-producer if you want to stay close, or you can just transfer your rights, you know. But it's possible only under copyright law, because us anyway, we lose the right. Even you know you take an option, then you acquire the right. Then you have in the contract the fact that you have 5 to 7 years in order to shoot the film. If you don't shoot the film, the right goes back to the owners, you know. So that's why we cannot have a second market in the rest of the world. Only copyright law can do that. And I remember as well, I was obsessed when I was a young producer, and could be much better in animation, by the way, but at that time animation was only for kids. I was obsessed by Italo Calvino, this Italian writer, and I was really looking for the right of Italo Calvino. And I didn't understand why it was so bizarre, the answers, and suddenly I heard the fact that the widow of Italo Calvino gave all the right of Italo Calvino to Richard Gere when he went and met her in Venezia. okay. And I was like, okay, but I didn't see, first of all, Richard Gere is not really a director, is he? I don't think so. And then after 10 years, he didn't do anything. So I was not powerful enough to go and convince Richard Gere to give me back the right of Italo Calvino. And maybe he had a better way to seduce the widows that I would have to seduce him. But at the end, somebody did, and now there is a project about an adaptation of one Italo Calvino book. So, you know, it's never impossible until it has been done. And then you have other possibility. You can do other remake or wait 30 years, so you have to start very young, 30 years until the rights are back to the publisher and you can buy the right again to do another movie. But 30 years, so really don't start at 50. Of course, a negotiation is like every negotiation, you know, like it's supply and demand, you know, more people want a book, more it's going to be difficult and financially unreachable. As I said, the notoriety of the book, the number of copies, the number of translation, because of course if you want to catch a co-producer, if the book is translated, it's going to help you a lot. The prizes, of course, you know, like if there is a big literary prize, it will increase the price of the option. Everything I've said. But what is very important is to understand with who you negotiate. Because you have many possibilities. It could be, of course, the publisher. Definitely. You know, when you have a book, your first reflex is to go and see the copyright, and you will know who has the copyright of the book. If, for example, if you are in Poland and you are reading a German book, and it's a German publisher, and you have no idea how to contact the German publisher, you call first your national publisher, because anyway you access the books through the translation in Polish, and then he will put you in touch, but you have to insist most of the time, because most of the time he doesn't care because he doesn't take a share. Understand that. It's only a question of money. They don't want to be bothered because they don't take a share, which is stupid, because at the end of the day, if you make a Polish movie about the German books, even if it doesn't touch any money, and it will be on screen, it will be screened in Poland, and it will, the book will have a second career. But it's so far away for them. It's true, it's 10 years, you know, in 10 years. So, and it's maybe. So you have to insist, really. And then, when it's not the publisher, it could be, and it's most of the, in Latin country, only, I think, Spain has good agent for literature agency. And of course, there are many in UK and many in the US. It's not French at all. We have one agency and so many publishers. So you can also deal with those agencies. It's exactly the same, you know, no difference. But what is not the same is when you have to deal with the writer himself. Sometimes they keep their right for audiovisual right. Or even worse, because a writer could be very open. You know, it's, with a writer, it's or yes or no. It's simple, you know. Like, some people are completely reluctant, and you can really sing or I don't know, come with cookies, or I don't know what, he will say no. And more money, he will say no. But some others are the opposite. They are very open, they are very curious, they would like to look at your previous film, and to understand why, what is the connection. So be prepared. It's really, you know, important, this relationship. But when you deal with a family, oh God, most of the time they will let you know, because of the memory of this big man or big woman, you know, I cannot, because it's, you know, it's, I don't know, it's too complicated and we are not sure enough. At the end of the day, it's because they want one more zero on the check. I'm sorry to be so trivial, but it's most of the time the case, you know. So it's really difficult to deal with the family, even though it happens because it's you. You are adapting Topor? Yes, no. Who is adapting Topor? You are adapting Topor, yes. And the son of Topor is an easy guy. As long as he understands what you want to do with a piece of art of his father, and he was an amazing artist, he is quite open, you know. But in general, is really difficult. And of course, they will tell you that they fear that you're gonna, the treason of the work of the dead guy and blah, blah, blah. And sometimes also the big problem is that they have no idea of how they should proceed. So it's sometimes this problem only, you know, that they don't know how to deal with that. And sometimes you deal with lawyers as well. So it's less emotional. But when you deal with lawyers, it means that normally the writer is a big name. For example, if you want to adapt, why not in animation at the end, Georges Simenon, Belgian authors, you have to deal with a lawyer based in Geneva. Already you understood everything. And his only job is to sell rights of Georges Simenon. So, and I can tell you he has a lot of money, so I guess that it means that it's huge, you know. And then when you start negotiating with this guy, you have no way to seduce him by the quality of the piece of art that you want to make from the book. Doesn't work. That's it. It's good to know. When you acquire an option, you have to really ask your question, a simple question. Are you ready to fight for love? Because this is only the fiançailles. You know, the option moment is only the fiançailles. You are together for 12 to 19 months, 18 months in order to understand if you really fit together, if the desire and the fantasy that you had from each other works on the field. But then it doesn't mean that everything is solved, you know, like it's the opposite. You start questioning the book, you start living together with the book. Sometimes you will have very good surprises, sometimes very bad surprises, because not every book is adaptable. Every book can be a source of inspiration for a director. This is true. Even the less adaptable book could inspire a director. Even for animation, because it's a question of connection between two languages, the languages of the writer and the languages of the director. But not everything is adaptable the way that you really feel like working together. So fighting for love means that you have to, first of all, be aware of the speed of the development, because you're going to be under pressure. Your producer will tell you, I've got an option for 18 months maximum. In 15 months, I need to be sure that I did right to acquire an option. And it goes very fast. It sounds long, but it goes very fast, especially because normally you do many other stuff. You know, you're not only focused on this development or this adaptation. And after a while, you know, when the option is expired, you have two possibilities. Or you break the fiançailles, and that's it. Or you think of getting married. If you still need time, because, for example, it's not the right season for getting married and everything, you can renew the option, but when you renew the option, it's really because you think that you will really getting married. If you renew an option just because you feel that you are lacking time, wrong. Most of people do that. They renew the option because suddenly they realize, oh God, it's gone, you know, and I spend already that amount of money and time, I don't want to lose it, so, okay, because option is 10% of the minimum guarantee. So it sounds very little. So you feel like, okay, I can play again, in a way, you know. But if you play again without asking you the question, was I slow because I was too busy? Was I slow because it is a wrong scriptwriter on board? Or was I slow because I lost a desire? If you're not honest with yourself, you're going to renew for nothing. And you're going to put yourself in a worse situation 12 months later or 18 months later, because more money involved and spent, because more time spent. And then some people, they jump into adaptation just because they feel that they have no other possibility. And of course, if you're a small company, after spending that amount of money, you feel obliged to jump and to adapt. When you're big, you can drop it, and that's it, what we call perte et profit. I don't know what it is, but for people who understand French, it's something that you can throw in the bin with no second thought, because it is time, it is life. This is development process where you don't produce everything you develop. When you're young and fragile, please don't jump into a second option just because you feel like, oh, okay, I've got a second possibility. Be sure that at the end you really want to get married. Of course, there are some other discoveries on the road, but try to question your desire. Very crucial. Then, if you are ready to jump, the contract is already signed, because even though when you sign an option, there is always a contract of acquisition, which is linked to the option. Never, never, please, sign an option without this contract. Otherwise, you can be trapped. An option is really has a value if the contract of acquisition is linked. Otherwise, it's very difficult. So when you decide to jump, the big problem, and that's also something that the publisher are able to do for animation, normally, when you sign an option plus a contract in feature film, 10% at the beginning. If you renew, again, 10%. And if you acquire the right, you have to pay 80% if you negotiate it well, because it means that the 10% are deductible from the minimum guarantee. If you negotiate not well, it means that you have to pay 90%, because the first option is always deductible, 90% when you acquire the right. And this is a lot of money. This is a lot of money when suddenly not all your financing is in place. But talking with publisher for feature animation, they consider not to ask you to pay 70% or 80% or 90% when you acquire the right, because they understand that your process is longer. Normally, in feature film, when you acquire the right, it's because you have, let's say, already a steady situation in the market. But it's a really different process. So there is still something that they can understand from your diversity. It's a different way of thinking. When you jump into adaptation, and suddenly you decide to acquire the right, of course you're going to give birth to a baby, a child, which is going to be the film, the adaptation. Unfortunately, don't think that 9 months is enough to deliver that baby. Of course not. Adaptation, people think that when you're going to adapt, it's going to be a slower process than if you do your own material. Untrue. Of course, there is a book already. There is something steady, a plot, something that you can really step on. But doesn't mean that to deliver the financing, the script for the financing, for example, or the last draft will be a shorter time of development. Not at all. You need more than 9 months, definitely. Otherwise, it would be easy after 12 months or 18 months to know if you want to go further. I'm too long.
Actually, before I would like to ask you to slowly wrap up. I would like to go one step back. And there's a question that came to my mind when you started to speak about the financial negotiations, either with the publisher or with the writer himself or the family in the worst case. Maybe you could share some experiences regarding requirements the rights owners might have, not on the financial side, but on the creative side. If they say, okay, we enter this relationship, this partnership with you, but you have to do this and this and that.
If I understood well your question, a publisher, of course, has a taste for cinema as we have a taste for literature. And most of them, when they don't know what to do, because, when they just want to make a deal, they don't ask so much question about the artistical vision that you have, When it's not about that, especially when, for example, the writer is involved, sometimes the writer really wants to know who you are. Doesn't mean that he wants to know what you're going to do with the material, because sometimes he lets you completely free, but he wants to know who you are. If he feels also the same connection that you feel with him and his work, you know. But many people, they don't really know how to see if there is a director on board after viewing 2 shorts, for example. Mm-hmm. So you really need somebody, you know, this is what I'm doing most of the time. I'm a kind of ambassador. I'm trying to translate what I feel from the talent of a producer or the talent of the director when they are fragile, when they are being named, it's not necessary, of course, in order to convince the publisher. But after that, it depends. If somebody else wants the right, it's more complicated. If nobody wants the right, it's quite easy.
Have you also had cases where the writer wanted to stay involved?
Yes, yes, of course, many times. And again, you have to understand that something that people normally they don't know. We feel that when we buy the rights of a book, the author will have 50%, if not 90%. It's not true, you know. Most of the time, you will have from 10 to 30% of the amount of money that you're going to give to his publisher, because most of the time, when you're a writer, except when you are famous already, of course, you renegotiate your contract. Your contract is this, you know, when your rights are going to be sold to cinema or television, whatever, we're going to split 70% for the publisher, 30% for you. Mm-hmm. Meaning that they feel that because they market the rights, then they can keep such a big amount of the percentage. Of course, the author suddenly see money, but not for him. So it's frustrating. So most of the time, he's asking to be a co-writer, not really because he wants to make a career or because he really is interested in that process, but also because he feels that with this second contract, he will have money.
And without it, only the 10%. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you know, sometimes it's a very good idea, because sometimes writers, they really play the game well. Sometimes it's not a good idea because they are too close to their project and they don't want to let it go. So it's also a question of personality.
Yeah, I think that's maybe an experience some of us have made here when adapting and having the writer involved. We don't have much time left, so I would like to open for questions here. Yeah, I see there is one already.
Hello, my name is Agnieszka Kruk. You also mentioned readers and the importance of their job. Who are your readers and how do people become your readers or consultants?
Mm-hmm. I've got readers only for books, by the way. When it comes to scripts, because people want my opinion, I give my opinion. It's more than an opinion, by the way. Consultancy, radiography, whatever you call it. But for books, I've got readers that I train, and my team is training now. I'm not in charge of training of the readers. And training means that we have many conversations with them before they write their report, trying to question the book from completely this aspect of adaptability. And if you're interested, I can send you one report. I guess I've got some in English, maybe not so many. Yeah, I've got some in English, definitely. Like this, you will understand immediately from which angle and point of view I question book. But it takes time always, you know. The first report that we receive, even from brilliant people who know both literature and cinema, never question the book from the right angle. So they have to redo it again. And so at what point it comes, and then it's natural and easy.
More questions?
What do you think about adapting foreign books? I'm a Polish-Poland-based producer, and say I'm in love with an Italian book, and I want this very Polish director to direct it. So what should I do? Obviously it depends what kind of book it is, but say it's very connected with a specific Italian region. Should it be shot in Italian or Polish, with Italian, Polish?
There's two questions in your question.
Actors.
Books travel and inspire everybody in the world, you know, and if you are not going to have a kind of lecture about adaptation, meaning that if you see books, it can be a Japanese book who inspired an American director, and there's no problem for that. But the second question is more interesting. Do we have to change the location or change the period of time, for example? And this answer is specific to each book. But everything can be done, and it's also when you fell in love with a book, which is not a book from your own country, it's open doors for real co-production. So it could also help for that, you know. But some books are completely, is it transposable? It's understandable, yeah? When you put a French book in Italy and a Polish book in Switzerland, yeah? So it's many books are. Some books are absolutely not transposable because it's linked to the culture, to the historical moment, and blah, blah, blah. But there is always a way, and it's never an issue. It's never an issue.